Did you know a Muslim scientist once became a master teacher of medicine for both the Islamic world and Europe? His name was Abu Bakr al-Razi, a brilliant physician, philosopher, and chemist from Persia. In the Western world, he was known as Rhazes. His works were studied for centuries, even until the early 18th century. Al-Razi did not only study science, he performed real research and experiments. He advanced chemistry after its foundations were established by Jabir ibn Hayyan and developed discoveries that helped shape modern chemistry. In medicine, Al-Razi became known as one of the greatest doctors in Islamic history. His books became major references for scholars in both the East and the West. But his genius did not stop there. He also wrote about philosophy, astronomy, physics, mathematics, music, and religious sciences. Historians estimate that he wrote more than 200 books during his lifetime. Born in Rai, Iran in 854 CE, Al-Razi proved that the Islamic world was once a center of global knowledge. And even today, his legacy lives on in the history of modern science. If in the previous part we learned that Al-Razi was one of the greatest doctors in Islamic history, this time we will see how his discoveries truly transformed medicine itself. Al-Razi did not only study Arabic and Greek medicine like many scholars of his time. He also studied Indian medicine and combined it with chemistry. This combination of knowledge allowed him to think far beyond his era. One of Al-Razi's most remarkable discoveries was his understanding of the connection between the mind and the body. He believed that a patient's mental condition could affect physical recovery. In his books, Al-Razi advised doctors not only to prescribe medicine, but also to improve the emotional state of their patients. He even recommended that sick people interact and spend time with healthy individuals to help their recovery. What we now call the psychological effect on health was already understood by Al-Razi more than 1,000 years ago. But it was only the beginning. Al-Razi also became a pioneer of clinical medicine. He was among the first scientists to test treatments on animals before applying them to humans. Today, this remains one of the most important foundations of medical research. In some cases, Al-Razi even experimented on himself. He believed that knowledge should be built through observations, research, and real evidence, not theory alone. Because of this, Al-Razi is considered one of the pioneers of the modern scientific method. He carefully recorded symptoms, compared treatment results, and used what is known as a control group. Some patients received new treatments, while others did not. This allowed him to observe whether a treatment truly worked. Methods like this only became common in modern science centuries later. In infectious diseases, Al-Razi made another major breakthrough. He successfully distinguished smallpox from chickenpox, two illnesses that were often confused because of their similar early symptoms. He later wrote a famous medical book called Al-Jadari wal Al-Hisbah, which explained how to identify these diseases from their earliest stages. That small book became one of the most influential medical works in Islamic history and was printed dozens of times in Europe for centuries. Al-Razi also became the first doctor to distinguish disorders of the small intestine from those of the large intestine. In ophthalmology, he wrote specialized books about the anatomy of the eye diseases, and surgical procedures using specific instruments. He even observed how the pupil expands in the darkness and contracts in bright light. This discovery later became important in eye examinations for centuries. But perhaps Al-Razi's greatest achievement was his massive medical encyclopedia known as Al-Hawi. The book gathered medical knowledge from Arabic, Greek, and Indian traditions, while adding Al-Razi's own research and clinical experience. Its contents covered an enormous range of topics, from nervous system disorders, fevers, and respiratory illnesses to eye diseases and dentistry. For centuries, Al-Hawi became one of the most important medical references in Europe. It is even said that the medical library of the University of Paris once treated Al-Hawi as one of its primary references. King Louis XI of France reportedly paid large amounts of gold and silver to have the book copied for royal physicians. But his genius extended beyond medicine. In chemistry, Al-Razi is remembered as one of the pioneers of modern chemistry. He described more than 20 laboratory instruments, classified chemical substances into categories, and developed advanced experimental techniques for his era. Al-Razi also succeeded in purifying alcohol for medical use and treatment. Even the word alcohol in Western language became known through Arabic scientific works. He also introduced surgical stitches made from animal membranes, the use of plaster casts for broken bones, and dietary treatments for diseases without relying entirely on medicine. Al-Razi further understood that some illnesses could run in families, a concept that closely resembles modern ideas about genetic inheritance. One of the most famous stories about Al-Razi happened when the Abbasid Caliph planned to build a great hospital in Baghdad. To choose the best location, Al-Razi hung pieces of meat in different parts of the city. He then selected the place where the meat decayed the slowest. According to him, the cleanest air and healthiest environment would be the ideal place for a hospital. This simple method demonstrated how Al-Razi always relied on experimentation and real observation when making decisions. A famous historian named Ibn Nadim al-Warraq once said that Al-Razi was the only scholar of his time who successfully combined the knowledge of earlier civilizations, especially in medicines. That means Al-Razi did not simply memorize old knowledge. He studied it, expanded it, and improved it. Another historian, Al-Qafti, described Al-Razi as an extraordinary Muslim physician and one of the leading scholars in logic and geometry. This shows that Al-Razi was not limited to one field. He was a multidisciplinary scholar, a doctor, philosopher, chemist, mathematician, and great thinker at the same time. Ibn Khalikan also wrote that Al-Razi was the leader of medicine in his era. According to him, Al-Razi studied medicine with incredible dedication and even traveled long distances to seek knowledge. All of that knowledge was later written into books that benefited humanity. One of his greatest works was Al-Hawi. The book became so influential that the famous historian Will Durant called it the greatest medical book for centuries. For hundreds of years, Al-Hawi remained one of Europe's most important medical references. A writer named Aldo Meili even is described Al-Razi as the greatest Arab physician in history. Meanwhile, Gustav Grenium explained that Al-Razi had a major influence on the development of medical thought in the West during the 9th and 10th centuries. According to him, Al-Razi studied medicine in a truly scientific way. He even wrote a thesis with a deeply humble message. The skill of physicians alone cannot cure every disease. That sentence reveals how Al-Razi understood the limits of human ability and the importance of continuous learning. But perhaps one of the most fascinating comments came from the German Orientalist Sigrid Hunke. She stated that Al-Razi's medical knowledge was so vast and comprehensive that few scholars since the time of Galen could compare to him. Hunke explained how Al-Razi pursued knowledge in extraordinary ways. He read countless books, interviewed patients' families, performed chemical experiments, and even traveled across regions to gain new knowledge. But it was not only his intelligence that earned respect. Al-Razi was also known as a compassionate doctor with strong moral character. He taught his students that medicine was a noble profession. According to him, doctors should fight against harmful medical practices through both words and actions. He was also known for treating poor patients for free and sometimes even giving them money after treatment. For Al-Razi, knowledge was not meant for fame alone. Knowledge had to serve humanity. A modern scholar named Dr. Amir An-Najjar once explained that Islamic civilization produced two major types of scholars: physicians who became philosophers and philosophers who became physicians. And Al-Razi was considered one of the greatest examples of the philosopher-physician. That is why Al-Razi's legacy continues to be honored today. Several Western institutions have recognized his contributions. It is said that Princeton University in America named one of its auditoriums after Al-Razi and preserved his works there. His portrait was also displayed in the Faculty of Medicine in Paris. This time, we will explore real stories that reveal his extraordinary intelligence in treating patients. The first story took place in As-Sugod, a region of Fargana, located near present-day Tajikistan. A prince there suffered from severe rheumatism. His body had become so weak that he could barely move. Many doctors had already tried to cure him, but all had failed. That was why Al-Razi was invited. But the journey to the palace was not easy. To reach the region, Al-Razi had to cross the massive Amu Darya River. The problem was, Al-Razi was afraid of crossing in the small boat prepared for him. He refused to board it, but the prince's messengers forcefully pulled him into the boat because the prince's final hope depended on him. They later apologized for their actions, explaining that they acted only for the prince's recovery. After arriving at the palace, Al-Razi tried many medical treatments, but nothing worked. Then Al-Razi told the prince something unusual. "Tomorrow, I will try a new treatment method, but prepare your best horse and donkey." The next day, Al-Razi brought the prince to a hot bath outside the city. The horse and donkey were left nearby. Inside the bathhouse, Al-Razi repeatedly immersed the prince in hot water while giving him a special drink. Afterward, Al-Razi stepped outside briefly to put on his clothes again. But when he returned, he was holding a knife. Suddenly, Al-Razi threatened the prince. He shouted, "Your messengers forced me onto the boat. Now I will take revenge by killing you." The prince was shocked and furious. Filled with fear and anger, he suddenly stood up and ran, using his own legs. At that exact moment, Al-Razi rushed out of the bathhouse, mounted his horse, and escaped the city as fast as possible. Some time later, Al-Razi sent a letter to the prince. In the letter, he explained that ordinary treatment would have taken a very long time. That was why he used a shocking method to trigger the prince's physical strength and emotions so his body would move again. And amazingly, it worked. When the prince's anger faded, he realized that he could truly walk again. Instead of becoming angry, he admired Al-Razi's intelligence. The prince later rewarded Al-Razi generously, including an annual allowance of 1,000 dinars and hundreds of sacks of grain. But Al-Razi's remarkable story did not end there. The second story took place in Baghdad. One day, a young man came to Al-Razi complaining that he constantly vomited blood. He told Al-Razi, "If you cannot cure me, then no doctor can." Al-Razi carefully examined the patient. Then he began thinking about something most doctors would ignore. Where had the young man been getting his drinking water? Al-Razi suspected that the illness came from contaminated water the patient had consumed during his travels. The next day, Al-Razi returned carrying 2 containers filled with moss liquid. He instructed the patient to drink them. The young man tried, but the taste was so terrible that he could not continue. Al-Razi then ordered the patient's son to force him to drink more. Soon afterward, the patient's stomach reacted violently. He began vomiting intensely, and when Al-Razi examined the vomit, he discovered something shocking: a live leech. The leech had entered the patient's body through dirty water and attached itself inside him, causing continuous internal bleeding. The moss mixture caused the leech to detach itself and leave the body through vomiting. And once the leech was removed, the young man finally recovered. If this story inspired you, don't let it stop here. Hit like and comment, share this video, and subscribe for more stories from the Islamic Golden Age that changed the world.